Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where every week we tell you a story and you add it to the stories that you've heard us tell you. I'm, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. Before we get into our story elements for this week, we're just going to do a quick recap of what we were talking about the last couple of weeks. Seth, you want to take that away?
Sure. So this would be our third episode. So this is kind of wrapping it up.
Yeah.
Kind of a very different story, I think, than we've done. A lot of stories we've done have been very sci-fi or fantasy, or whereas this one kind of is, I was going to say historical fiction, but that's not really historical fiction. It kind of takes place, old enough that, they didn't have just tons of satellites and radios, but kind of real Earth time kind of thing.
Right.
And the genre of it being kind of like a crash survival in the Pacific Northwest.
We'd kind of put it, I think, at like religious drama. I think if it was in like a Barnes and Noble, it would be like in the religious drama section.
Yeah, probably.
I believe. With like Frank Peretti's The Oath and like This Present Darkness and stuff like that, probably.
Yeah, I definitely say that's probably where it would find itself. So anyways, like I had said, it's kind of a crash survival. You have kind of pulling on themes of, if people are familiar with, if you're not sure what like the crash survival in the Pacific Northwest, think of like The Edge with Anthony Hopkins and I think it's Alec Baldwin. Other kind of elements being kind of like, and then there were none, kind of something dramatic going on and people are kind of dropping out and you have to kind of figure out what's going on as they're all trying to survive and whatnot. But anyways, what we have is there's the plane crash and it's carrying several passengers, the crew, there's a priest on board. And what's going on is they were flying up, and most of these people were going to be flying in to kind of this private lodge where they'd all been invited because of an intrigue on something that's in the Pacific Northwest. This is made up. If there's actually a like old legend of something like this, like we'd love to hear about it. Otherwise, we think that we're just kind of pulling this out of our creative hat. But something that has like I don't know, with it like creative power, something's like spiritually powerful up there. And,
right, yeah.
So some of these people are being drawn to kind of attend this thing, to like find this place or some kind of elite ritual to gain power by drawing from wherever this thing is. However, what's going on is it's kind of cultic, and what this flight is, just like probably several other flights that have been happening in the same manner, is they're the sacrifice that these people are using to kind of garner up power for themselves. Because part of that brings in then the magic system, which is kind of a pretty strict kind of sacrifice and get kind of thing. And you have, and being it's kind of in real time, and I think we've established this, we're all Christians here. And so, the pantheon that Levi brought up. Sorry if I brought up several of the topics, but didn't attribute it to what.
That's all right. Just a rundown of the stories. Yeah.
But the rundown of the stories, you do have, it's real life. So, the pantheon structure is going to be,
the Christian God.
The Christian God, and you've got, the demons, the angels, so in kind of this going on, you've got some interaction between some of this stuff. And as then they're kind of trying to get out, but also dealing with, some of these people then trying to kill everybody off because obviously they survived. It was supposed to be that kind of sacrifice, but then you've got another character coming in, the anti-hero, and kind of playing on an idea that the anti-hero is kind of like that in place of, so more or less the villain, right? But throughout most of the story is kind of taking the place of, he's got the answers, he's supporting, he's kind of taking the lead, everybody, is kind of leaning on him, right? But kind of as the story progresses, you realize that he's not the hero. He's kind of in place of the hero, kind of against the hero kind of thing going on. And then we have, at some point, I don't know if we've got it that they've met them, or maybe at some point they meet the wise old woman.
What was her name again, Reed?
What was the name, Reed?
Mudrost. It means wisdom in Russian.
Right,
because the Chilcotin natives don't even have a word for wisdom in their language, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But she was her great grandmother had been raised by Russian missionaries because her father was killed in the uprising of like 18. I think it was 1864 or something like that. There was anyway. It was after Seward's fall, after the Americans bought Alaska, and then there was a crew that was up there building a road, and they got wiped out, and then they sent in the army and wiped out the Indians, and it was a bad kind of a deal all the way around.
Right. So in this story, there's kind of, in the original plane crash, there was 3 groups of people, right? There was the pilot, the co-pilot, the stewardess, and the pilot's son, who was the priest, who was just kind of like catching a ride with his dad on the plane, right? He wasn't supposed to be there really. And then there was the kind of the lackeys for the cultists, pretty much, who were kind of the handlers, bringing people, quote unquote, to the lodge, really there to like complete this sacrifice ritual and die as well in this plane crash that was supposed to happen. And then you have the millionaires, the billionaires, whatever, the rich people, the people who were, it was supposed to be the power of their worth that was going to provide a lot of weight towards this sacrifice to accomplish something terrible and evil, right? And then the anti-hero, his name was William, right?
Correct.
William Greenlee.
He just, my thought is that he kind of like shows up, or is he one of the people on the plane, do you think?
I think he's one of the people on the plane, because I think what I brought in is that he's kind of a either like, archaeologist, historian, kind of a, maybe professor, right? Someone that kind of, is confident in his field, knows what he's talking about, kind of is familiar with some of the area, not like because he's hiked it, but like holds weight, holds, my kind of thought for this, again, kind of pulling back to, and then there were none, is, big spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, there's a character in there that, because they're all like supposedly convicted people, but you have like this one character that kind of is keeping his cool, is kind of directing, kind of the thought process, kind of keeping and so you're supposed to be figuring out who the bad guy is, but the way that the movie is done, if you're thinking about it, you can kind of figure out that he's the one behind it. But it's that idea where it's like, he's not putting himself out of suspicion, but he's kind of like saying the right things to bring the thought to the right place to kind of move the plot along. And everybody kind of trusts him because he's, he's a judge and he's educated and he's, philosophical and, kind of like hedges in from like, let's say going too fearful to, too, lax about it, but kind of hedging it in. And so everyone kind of is relying on his input, even though it's like, that kind of idea. But yeah, so that kind of air. So he kind of takes charge, kind of supportive of everybody. Kind of like, okay, this is kind of survival stuff. I've done hiking. I'm an archaeologist. I've survived in different things, different digs. We got to, find shelter. This is the kind of place we're at. We got to rally together. We got to send out some scouting parties, make sure we got a safe place to be, right. So, but then over time is kind of his obsession with this place, right? I would say he's not one of the lackeys. He's not one of the crew, but he would have been one of the people that would have been drawn to come up here, right? But in his kind of, as he starts developing, because again, you have like the spiritual forces kind of, excuse me, playing in the background, and he gets this idea that he's going to kind of eliminate certain people, make the sacrifices to kind of gain power, and eventually get a group of people to kind of then make his own cult with him at the center once they get to this place, because he's being drawn to the power of it and kind of becoming obsessed.
Right. Okay.
And so that's kind of where he comes from. He's not the lackey, so he's not the person involved that then is trying to kill everybody off at first because it wasn't successful, but is kind of being corrupted himself as it goes along to kind of, being drawn into this kind of desire for taking that power for himself and organizing kind of a cult.
Right. And I think what we had decided was that when they first crashed, they kind of got the download from the co-pilot who was in the plane and maybe like in a like wedged into a way that they couldn't take him out, and he is the one that kind of gives them the lore dump, like we're way off course, no one knows where we are, we were headed towards this thing, something went wrong, we're not sure, and then he dies. And then there's kind of like a fight that ensues about, are they going to go, they're going to head east or are they going to head west? Because there's nothing south, there's nothing north. The lodge is west. Humanity is eventually east, and it kind of wins out that they go east. And that's where they meet the wise old woman, is kind of coming up over this pass, which she was supposed to watch over. That's like what she'd been doing her whole life, is watching this pass as kind of like, we had said maybe like she was on protection detail for this power, this reservoir of good or whatever it is that they're seeking to corrupt or take or destroy. And there's like a splitting off moment where everyone else keeps going and the good guys, stay back and all their foods get taken. And then eventually, I don't remember. Do you guys remember from last time we recorded? It was like they were at the pass and it was like I was talking about how you need like a defining moment where the bad guys are revealed as bad guys. And up until this point, it was kind of ambiguous whether or not the bad guys were actually bad.
Right. And I think we ended last time with them kind of making that decision where, some of the people that had been coming around to, like, I hate to say like the good side, but, like realizing that, wait a minute, like this sacrificing of other people or like, finding joy that's like, oh, Thompson fell out of the tree and he didn't make it, but, we found this big stock of food or, and then kind of over time, more and more of these people are becoming more and more comfortable with that idea that it's okay that, someone had to be sacrificed for us to get that little bit that we wanted, in a selfish manner, where you have that opposing group that more and more they're giving of themselves for the sake of the other people, right? And it's kind of like helping them fight for their own, not their own good, that's not the right word, but it's like forming them into the good guys, right? Rather than giving into the more selfish ego of simply wanting to get your own satisfaction, be it food or clean water or, escape or which direction you're going or whatever it is that, does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think
so you kind of have,
No, you're good. We had said that kind of happens at that pinnacle and the good guys, quote unquote, get left behind. And that's when they meet this wise old woman. And I think that's kind of where we closed it out last time. So what story elements did you guys have?
I have random insert.
I have wild card.
I have goal. A bunch of really really ambiguous. Inambiguous. Is that the right word? Really kind of general ones.
Vague,
that's the word I was looking for. Reed, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first? Are your guys' elements gonna work into this story?
I'll see what you guys might want to do. I had wild card and I chose, I hate to say like sad ending or necessarily happy ending. I would say it leans to sad, and I can explain why, but it's
an ending.
Yeah, and so it's an ending and kind of how things wrap up. But also, Levi, with you having goal,
right?
I don't know how that might change. I mean, I have this rough idea on like kind of the ending actions and kind of the wrap up, like philosophical thing happening.
Yeah.
But I don't know if like you bring the goal in, if that might, let's say, alter how it happens. I'm pretty hard set on, this idea, but
I think that I think I could have a goal that would remain interesting enough to not, should I just say what the goal is?
Yeah, sure.
All right. It is the goal of, what's her name again? The wise old woman?
Mood roast.
Mood roast.
Yeah, it's Russian.
It's her goal to stop this thing from happening with any means necessary. And by any means necessary means in the cave sort of place where she lives, right up in this mountain pass kind of area. She has between 12 to 25 sticks of dynamite, and she's ready to use it. So that's her goal. Sorry if that's a complete departure from Mudros standard MO, but I figure she's kind of Russian anyways, so she doesn't really play by the rules. And, maybe there was a train line that went through here or something, and that's why I don't know. I had this vision of them all talking about what they could do. And Mudrost keeps saying things like, don't worry, we can just blow them away. It'll be very easy. And they're all like trying to think critically, where they're like coming out of like starvation, and she's like totally, completely nutritiously fine. And they're all like, we've got to stop them. They're going to do this evil thing. And she's like, it'll be fine. They won't see what hit them. And they're like, finally, they're like, what are you talking about? And she just like takes the like blanket off the top, and there's like 3 boxes of dynamite. It's kind of a random insert, which I realize.
That's all right.
But and I'm also kind of deciding that they sort of resolve after they meet her, and 1 to 2 days, 1 day or so of recovery, they kind of are resolving to keep going forward and to try and stop whatever's happening. Also, Seth, I had an interesting thought with your magic system, because you had that magic system initially. My thought was, and this is going to seem kind of mean, and people can tell me that it's mean, but it's my thought. This is my podcast. But that the magic system doesn't work on someone whose soul has been paid for already. Right? Because part of the essence of it is that this is a unattached soul. So when you sacrifice it, you steal the energy from it, and you can accomplish what you want. But the problem is that some people's souls aren't attached. Are attached to something else.
Right.
So it's kind of like a resistance. And that's one of the reasons why they haven't really bothered to kill the priest or the priest's father, the pilot. They didn't really bother to kill them because they couldn't use their deaths for anything. I don't know what you think about that. I kind of like it because it kind of gives the Christians kind of a superpower, you know?
I was kind of going along on the random insert I have is I call it Turncoat. And this is a guy, I'm just going to name him Jackson. I'm introducing a character.
Okay, cool.
He worked for the lodge owner. He's on the crew. And he has been part of this whole thing, luring people up for these wilderness experiences, and then, practicing, literally practicing human sacrifice to gain power and this whole thing. And he got along, he was kind of seduced into it, what a cool job, work for this like wilderness experience, but little by little, he realized that this guy, the owner, the guy that headed up everything, he was really, he would always be too familiar, and he would get information, and he would get something on you so that he would be assured of your cooperation.
Right.
And he was, little by little, he had gotten sucked into this, and he didn't, almost imperceptibly, realized how corrupted he had become. But he had when I call him Turncoat, what happened was he had an epiphany. And what happened is his wife had 2 small children. His wife is an immigrant from Venezuela, and he just loved her, and he thought that this was going to be a really great way to kind of jumpstart their financial plans, working with, for this guy for a while. It was really lucrative and whatnot, but she was really, really troubled, first of all, by the long absences and not being able to come along and bring the kids. It's just not, that just wasn't work, so he was away, like a lot of couples do that, guys in the military, and go on deployments and stuff like that. But she felt that there was something wrong. They had arguments about it. And she ended up packing the kids up and heading back to grandma's house in Venezuela. And he had this epiphany. He realized that all this guy really had on him is that he knew where his family was. And he realized that he put subtle hints out that, nice little family you got there. It'd be a shame if something were to happen to him, and he said, he doesn't have anything on me, except of course he'd kill me, if I betrayed him. But he said, this whole thing is messed up, and I'm just not going to do it anymore. And he's having this kind of spiritual awakening, and he says, I don't want to be a bad guy. We're bad guys. This is really messed up. And so what he was on the plane crash, but he's with the bad guys, but he's seeking a way to turn things around so that their plans are going to be foiled. And he hopes to be able to escape, but he's just made a decision. You know what? This is messed up enough that if it cost me my life, that's too bad. I'm not going to be part of this anymore. So there's a sleeper agent in the lodge owner's crew. Anyway.
Great. I like that. That's really good, Reed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to bring in my idea for the ending. And yes, Levi, I like the idea you put forth earlier. And I think it plays in well with like
Wait, say
part
that
of
again.
how, okay, the idea with the magic system.
No, the other part where you said you liked my idea. Come on, just one more compliment.
You're the best, Levi. All your ideas are the best.
Great. Okay, we're good. Okay, yes.
Okay, so it actually plays in well with part of how the ending comes together.
Yeah.
And I think as explaining it, then I can explain why that would be, and why then when people would go to sacrifice, they at first, let's say, wouldn't go after the priest or his dad. And then eventually, as you have someone, was it Jax?
I called him Jackson, but is that what you're talking about?
So then like maybe there's like a couple times where like they were going to get him because he's on the fence, but then through some intercession he's saved, and then like maybe he's kind of unbeknownst to some of the other people, but let's say the more sinister people that were, let's say, at first trying to make sure he was ousted, because of course the evil one knows he's on the fence and is, going to go to the other side and wants to stop him from going right.
Right, absolutely.
But then eventually sometime in the story, and maybe like the good guys don't know it, but then it's like he has a lot of close calls, but like, it's like, oh wow, they were cutting wood and like he tripped and broke his leg, but that actually saved him from like the tree falling, because if he hadn't like broke his leg, like tripped and broke his leg, that tree would have fallen on him, right? Which there was still like almost something bad where it's like he keeps having this brush in and like barely escaping, right?
Right.
And eventually it's like it kind of stops, right?
Yeah.
And then he's kind of, and then eventually it comes out that then maybe at some point he shares his story, what he's going through and what happened, and then it's revealed that like there's been intercession and the angels or saints or whatever kind of like watching over him and keeping him from harm through the intercession of the other people that are, anyways. And then you have, so that kind of saves him. But then the idea for that is because it doesn't work, right? Because almost in this idea, last time we, purposely sacrificed one of these people, like it didn't turn out well for us. The person that they follow, right? When we tried to make a sacrifice of him, like it turned out really bad, right?
Explain that again.
Right. So you have the reason they're not kind of being targeted in that way for the sacrifice part of it is right. The last time they tried to take someone of that nature, not just Jax, but the priest, the dad, like it, right. And then this growing group of people that are coming to this other side, right? They're off the table of even wanting to use as one of these like sacrifices, because then the last time they tried to make a sacrifice out of someone of that nature, it didn't turn out well for them, right?
Right.
And so in that idea, they're not necessarily being targeted. Not that they're not being targeted, let's say, on the outside physical, like in coming against them, oh, your idea sucks, you want us all to die, right? So they'll come against them more openly, but then they actually don't want to then like, oh, we could, we'll get Jax aside now, or the priest aside, and if we, make an accident happen, then we'll be able to, get that hunt so we can have something to eat, right? In that sacrifice system, because then it's like the evil forces behind that know that in sacrificing a Christian for that purpose doesn't turn out well for them, right? It actually is counterproductive,
right?
Which plays in. So anyways, that was kind of part of that explanation. So here's my idea of how like the ending kind of comes about. What you have is, so now these two groups have separated. It's kind of now revealed that this guy that's kind of been the hero, holding everybody together, making things happen, holding everything together, right? It kind of reveals that he kind of pulls aside and kind of makes this, it's like, we're going here because this is where I'm going. And now he's got his lackeys. They're going to follow him, right? And, when we found food, I'm the one that found food. When we got this, I'm the right. And so they kind of separate. and then you have your kind of main group continues east, as then they take this valley that goes, was it west?
Correct. Yes.
West to where this lodge and where the, this place would be, right?
Right.
So we have that. That's where the separation is. However, what ends up happening is, of course, now they're separated. They're going now. I'm bringing in that perhaps they're going through the valley. They're getting close. The wise old woman maybe tries to take them out, blows part of the valley up. They can't pass it, right? And so that's when then, as far as this goes, William then plays his hand in like pushing forward with this and makes the rest of them like instead of like pulling it to the side and all having incidents, right? Brings forth that now, like, to serve this, to get this power, we have to sacrifice this thing, and to pass this so we can get to where we need to be. One of you has to be sacrificed by the others, right? And drives them to basically kill off, like in a very violent fashion, either one or two of the other people that are there, which then really just pushes them over the edge into just kind of.
Remember what the fighting style was? Do you guys remember what the fighting style was? It was the desperation, like the scrambling fear, desperation. So that, this story is really dark.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So that is the part that gets really dark. And here's the reason I was going to go with a sad ending and why I would say it's sad, because I'll get to the more happy part in a minute. But the idea with what's going on here is that through all of this, like, these people don't repent. Like, they just wholeheartedly push that direction, right? And they don't come back. Some people do, like Jax or as it goes on, right? But then it's that overwhelming, like, sad fact that they choose to just kind of go this direction, right? And don't take all the opportunities to cast that off and like do what's right, do what's good, right? And so in that sense, and because that gets so dark, that's kind of the sad ending. However, part of the sad ending would be this. Now, with that whole system, what happens, so they separate, that's kind of happening over there. And so our real hero, as it would seem then, the priest, right, is kind of caught up, and he sees this in a vision, right? So they're separated now, and he sees that happened, right? And it moves him to just tears and, right? And so it's like heavy fog, they can't find their way. They're there, they're surviving, and kind of bringing back to where, kind of in the same way where, like, in the Bible, Paul says that if I were to be cast out for the sake of my brethren, right, I would willingly do it.
Right.
That's what he does. So kind of in that theme of that self-sacrifice for the benefit of others rather than sacrificing others for the benefit of self. Something happens to him then, right?
I just had a flash with, the duel between old Obi-Wan and Darth Vader, and he said, "You could strike me down, but I'll become more powerful than you could ever imagine." And he strikes,
Right.
and his just,
and
just
so
joins the Force.
Something out of the ordinary, like a tree falls on him, something happens, right? And he's dying, and this image of then kind of out of the woods, either like a mountain lion or like a bear. So you have these kind of good guys, right? And it's like, now this like doesn't make sense. He's moved to tears, like whatever. He then sacrifices him, not like he killed himself. It's a kind of a hard thing to explain, but anyways,
there's lots of ways you could do it. I mean, you could do it where they're moving through a thing and something falls and he's holding up the rock so that everyone can get by.
Yeah.
He's holding up the tree branch. He's staying behind. He's holding this end of the rope. There's lots of ways to accomplish a self-sacrifice death that doesn't have to necessarily do with violence or like just out and out immediate suicide.
At the bottom of this,
suicide was not on my mind at all. It just like something happens. Either that's like the heroic thing, right? That's why he's then the hero, is because through all this, the whole thing is this idea of sacrificing others for the benefit of self rather than sacrificing self for the benefit of others.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's then the sacrifice he makes, be it like, let's say they get this rope bridge and he's holding this thing so they can zip line across, and then, but it's like foggy, and then it's like everyone kind of made it across, and then like there's a crash, and you hear like a tumble, and then like the rope is then loose, and like that, I don't know, something where then he's given himself, so they
Yeah.
can get to the other
Yeah.
side. And when that happens, the fog lifts, like, and they're able to like get out, or, find, then it's like the fog lifts, they're able to get over this kind of pass, and they find the road, and they're able, like, okay, now we got a road, we just have to follow it back now to, where there would be something. And so that's kind of the happy ending part of it, is they get out. Right. However, then what happens is he's dying, right? But then I have this image of, like I said, like a mountain lion or a bear, like comes and picks him up, like, but more like a child, right? And then brings him like to the place, right? So like carries him through the woods.
To which
and
place? To the lodge?
Not to the lodge, but to where that, like through the other pass to the place,
power.
not the lodge, but the power, right?
Right.
Where then the animals like bury him in that place, right? And then in part of that, it's like they cross paths with where now William is like in a frenzy. It's then implied that he's like killed all the other people, and like, I don't know how dark I want this part to be, right?
Yeah.
But
I
then
mean, it's pretty dark stuff. So I'd say,
pretty dark, where he's like, I don't know, he's got like maybe where, I don't know, where in their skull, and he's just completely lost it, right? So showing that image where that complete, just kind of like he couldn't get through the pass, right? And then like this bear comes up carrying the priest, right, as he comes by, and then it's like that realization where you see what's happening is like nature is honoring him, bringing him to this place, giving him the burial, right? And then passes by, and so that like the gentleness that the bear has for the priest, right? And when it like comes up, and so you have like William, and he's just in that frenzy, he's killed the last guy, he's got it like, right, just completely gone sicko, right? And then just kind of seeing that, and then like the bear comes up, and like whatever had been blown up, just kind of crumbles away to make the opening again, so they can get through. And then he's like, what? It's opening for him. And then like the bear puts the priest down, or like a mountain lion or whatever. I don't know how many animals are all in this, but then, and then turn and kill William, and then turn back and take him and bring him the rest of the way.
Yeah.
That's kind of the vision of how I saw kind of the ending taking place.
I think that's a great ending. I think that's a great story.
It is. It's a good one.
So I'm not going to have AI write us a short little section of this story, because this story is really, I think we'll have a lot of weird stuff to talk about next week when we do our recap episode.
Yeah.
A lot more kind of personal things, beliefs about spirituality and stuff like that. That's not at all what I was expecting these episodes to go to, but here we are. So it's good, but I'm not going to have AI write a short story about this. Sorry, everybody who really liked that last time. We'll pick that up with the next one. Hopefully it's a bit more lighthearted. However, we will continue to produce these. If you have any questions about them, if you have any concerns about us and how we're doing, let us know. Our email address is waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. Our Twitter handle is @getsbettercast. We'd love to hear from you. Love to hear your thoughts, your opinions on our latest stories or on any story. And then next week, join us as we talk about our inspirations for this story, our thoughts on the philosophy of it. It's going to be a good one. And then we'll pull elements for the week after next when we start a new story. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you later. Bye.